house.
I was a pastor in New York, upstate New York. We lived there for 4 years or so. Actually on my second stint with Crew, and have done some other things in between. But for the last 13 years or so, 14, I've been online. I started Facebook when it was just for college students, and you had to have a .edu email address to get on Facebook. And so then when my mom joined, it was weird. And when other people started joining, it seemed weird. I started a blog probably in 2005, 6, around then, and I've been writing ever since. My wife and I just started a podcast because people listen to podcasts, and we want to help people follow Jesus. And so I'm by no means an expert, but I have been around a little bit when it comes to the internet. And now, of course, we're learning about the problems with digital ministry right here as I try to do something on my computer to share my screen. So bear with me a second because there's a Zoom problem. Try this again. There we go. Okay. Handy little tip for you as we get started here. If you go to the top of your screen, you'll see it says you are viewing James's screen. And there's a little black box next to that. It says View Options. Click on that down arrow and then click side-by-side mode. And that way you'll be able to see me as I'm talking, and the presentation, which I find pretty helpful. Okay. Well, again, I'm really glad to be with you. I think it's cool that you guys are all over the country, all over the world, learning about how to reach people. So I'm glad I connected with Jim. Here's the thing I want to start with. Just want to lay out a roadmap for today. What we're going to do is we're going to start talking about why we should be reaching people digitally. And so I don't just want to jump right into the strategies. I don't just want to jump right into the how-to. I do want to kind of lay a foundation of why should we be reaching people digitally. And then what we're going to talk about is how do we approach it. And so this is more of the heart level stuff. How do we approach digital ministry with the right mindset, with the right disposition, so that we're doing it in a way that honors Christ, in a way we're doing it in a way that's appropriate. And then the bulk of our time is going to be, how do we do it? Like, what are the strategies? What are the tools? What are some tips? Again, I'm by no means an expert, right? I am not like a social media maven, but what I know is that Jesus started with 12 followers, right? And he obviously didn't have an Instagram account of 12 followers. He just had 12. And so whether you have 10 people following you on a social media platform, you personally, or whether you have just 100 people following your church, because the world is so connected, you can impact anybody. And even in my little corner of the internet world, I've gotten emails from people in other countries telling me they've been encouraged by something that's been written or posted. And so you can do it too. And so I'll give you some strategies I think that can help. We will have a time of Q&A, but as Jim mentioned, the internet is nearly infinite, right? Like, it's not, if you can find the end of the internet, let me know. I'd like to see what it's like, but it's so big, we can't cover anything. And so what I'm going to do after kind of each section is just give you some time to submit questions. One great feature about Zoom is if you got a question, you could just put it in the chat and then we can check it there. So we'll stop, look at the chat. If you want to verbally ask some questions after each section, that's great. But then at the end, we'll have a good chunk of time for some Q&A for things that I didn't get to cover, or other things that you want to talk about as it relates to digital ministry. All right. So that's the layout. One thing I want to mention before we get started, I'm going to use the terms virtual, digital, internet, even social media interchangeably. Obviously, they don't all mean the same thing. And you can use the internet specifically without specifically using social media, but really it's just too confusing to parse it all out each time I mention it. So virtual, digital, good catch-all terms. But just so you know, if I use one of those terms, I'm just referring to the same thing, because essentially we're using technology, we're using the internet, the web to reach people, whether it's social media or not. So I'm going to pray again, and then we'll get started here. Well, gracious Father, thanks that we can gather virtually, that we see each other's faces here on Zoom, that I'm able to connect with sisters and brothers around the world, and offer some help as we try to navigate this new world, which is not super new to us, but in the scope of history, it's very new, to reach people through phones and tablets and computer screens when we can't see them face to face. And so we pray that what we do here is really helpful. Pray that it's beneficial. Pray that it hits our hearts, but also gives us some practical tools that we can walk away with in order to help people meet Jesus, help people grow in Jesus, prepare people, empower people to do ministry wherever you have them. So we pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, so let's start with, why should we reach people digitally? Here's the question I've wrestled with over the years I want you to consider as we begin. Why in the world should I try to reach people with the gospel digitally, virtually, or over the internet? Now, if you don't think you should, hopefully I can convince you over the next 45 minutes to an hour, and then in more time after that in Q&A. If you're unconvinced, we could talk more. But I want you to write down an answer if you have it handy, or type it on your phone. I'm going to just give you 30 seconds here. Why do you think we should reach people virtually? So go ahead, write your answer down. It doesn't have to be, this is not complicated. It's not a trick question. Don't overthink it. Write your answer down. Why should we try to reach people virtually? Okay. Hopefully you have something there. I've wrestled with this question for over a decade, probably closer to 13, 14 years. And I've had seasons of, I need to get off the internet. I need to get off social media. I've had other seasons where I post a lot. Some of it's really good, some of it's helpful. And then there's seasons where I see so much of the negativity or the problems with the internet and social media specifically. And I'm like, I got to get off. I need a break. But here's what I always come back to. I want to put the gospel within arm's reach of anyone and everyone, which means I want to have a presence where people are, right? I want to be where people are. And where are people in 2020, right? Where do they spend their time? They spend their time on the internet. That's where they're at. There's almost, we'll come back to this slide in a second. There's almost 4 billion people using social media today. So the entire planet in 1971 didn't have 4 billion people. And can you think about that for a second? Like, there's 4 billion people using social media today. And before I was born, 13 years before I was born, there weren't that many people. That's astounding to me. And so people in Asia, Africa, these places where in America we think, oh, well, they're not too advanced. They're on cell phones. They're using Snapchat and WhatsApp and Facebook. They're on the internet. This is where people spend their time. 321 million new people joined social media in 2019. So that's nearly the population of the United States. Okay, 4.5 billion people now use the internet. All right, so think about that. 4 billion people are using social media. 4.5 billion people now use the internet. So most of the people who are online, they're on social media specifically. There's almost 5.5 billion mobile phone users. Most of the people who are accessing the internet, they are doing it on their mobile phone. And so the internet is in their pocket. Even when I was in college, that wasn't a thing. I went to college with a flip phone that didn't get on the internet. It could text and call, but now the internet's in people's pockets. On average, people spend about 2.5 hours a day on social media. I have a friend who talked to a high school student a couple weeks ago. Of course, school's not in session on campus, and students have a lot more time on their hands, but they said they spent 8 hours that day on TikTok, which is a social media app that features short videos. 8 hours a day watching 8-second videos. So that's where they're spending their time. 27% of social media users discover new products and ads on social media. So when you want to buy that thing that you want, you're probably seeing an ad on social media. So here's some more specific statistics as it relates to social media. Almost 1.5 billion people are on Facebook. YouTube has over 1 billion users. Instagram, 800 million. And you can see the rest of these statistics. And if you want to take a screenshot of that, go ahead. People, so many people, almost probably the majority of my generation and younger around the world are on social media. But then as you look at the world in total, this is where people spend their time. So why are these statistics important? They're important because if we want to be good missionaries in a world that needs Jesus, then we need to know where to find people, right? So ultimately, like, this is a missional thing. It's not mainly just a strategy thing. It's not mainly just, this is cool and I need to be cool with people. This is a missional endeavor. It's a disciple making endeavor, right? Go make disciples of all nations. Where are the nations? Where are they hanging out? They're hanging out on the internet. Now, my job with Crew, your job in the churches and the ministries that you represent, as missionaries, our job is to contextualize. And I'm sure that you've heard that word before. It simply means, if we're going to put it in a nutshell, we communicate the message of the gospel in ways that people will understand it in their context without changing the message of the gospel. And so people are online, so let's get the gospel to them. We get them in short posts, videos, pictures, podcasts, really whatever it takes. What we want to do is we want to speak the language, their language, faithfully put the gospel in their language so they can understand it and they come to know Jesus or grow in Jesus. And the internet, social media specifically, is their language. That's what they understand, particularly for the next generation. High school, college, middle school, that's their language. And so we want to speak their language. I don't know about you, but I get, like, when you see these statistics, I get overwhelmed. And that's why I'm convinced we need to reach people virtually. Now I have to ask, is there a biblical precedent for this? Well, no. Surprisingly, Jesus didn't have Instagram followers, right? He didn't have an Instagram. There's no electricity. There's no fiber optics. There's not an exact precedent. There's not an exact parallel, but there is a principle. There is a biblical principle for this, and that's what I want to see. So I want to share a couple passages with you. But first, I want you to think about this big picture idea. The New Testament is a missionary document that was produced because ministry needed to happen at a distance. And so that's true particularly of the apostolic letters, right? The apostles used the technology of their day, simple parchment and dyes to make ink, to write letters and send them on ships. That was what they had. But they did ministry at a distance. And that's what we're doing today. We're ministering to people that we're not close to. Here's the first passage that kind of hits close to home when you think about this. 1 Thessalonians 2:17, Paul says, "But brothers and sisters, when we were orphaned by being separated from you for a short time in person, not in thought, out of our intense longing, we made every effort to see you. We wanted to come to you. Certainly I, Paul, did again and again, but Satan blocked our way." And then consider Romans 1, verse 11 and 12. "I long to see you so that I may impart some spiritual gift to you, to make you strong. That is, that you and I may be mutually encouraged by each other's faith." So Paul couldn't get to these people. He longed to see them. So what did he do? Did he just forget about them? Out of sight, out of mind? No, he wrote to them. And I have to believe if Paul lived and ministered today, one, he'd be all over the world because he could fly, right? He'd be on living out of airports all the time. But he'd also be tweeting and Instagramming and blogging the gospel. He'd have Facebook groups for all these churches that are sprouting up. He'd get the news of Jesus out in podcasts. He would do what he could because in the first century, he did what he could with writing letters and sending them via messengers. In the 21st century, he would be using Facebook Messenger. That's what he would be doing. And I believe we have this responsibility to steward the resources that God has given to do all that we can today with the digital tools we have at our disposal to get the gospel out. Now, I mentioned, this people spend time on social media. This is where they live. Throughout Acts, Paul went from town to town, and he would always stop in kind of a public square area, right? He'd stop in the synagogue, which is where the Jews would discuss the scriptures, and the format was a lot different than our churches today, and there would be much more discussion. And then in Acts 17, Paul goes into the Areopagus in Athens, which was kind of like a town square. And in Acts, in that chapter, Luke tells us, people spent their time doing nothing, and you see it on the screen, talking about new ideas. This is where they hung out. And what's that sound like in today's world? Sounds like the internet. Social media is the new public square. It's where people spend their time talking about ideas, consequences of ideas. Yeah, they share memes, and I love memes. I love, cute pictures of kids and pets and all that kind of stuff. But when you look at the whole of social media, this is the place where ideas take root, where people learn, where people grow, where people are informed. Right or wrong, this is where they are. And so this is where I think the apostles would have spent their time, in addition to meeting people face to face. It's where I spend my time. It's where you probably spend your time, maybe not all of it. But if we want to be good missionaries, we need to know where people are, what they're doing, and how to speak their language. Of course, in-flesh ministry, right, is still vital. This is not a substitute for that. I feel like that's just a big disclaimer. You all probably know that. That's where most of our ministry should be, local, with people that we live with, work with, play with. We see people every day or every week on some regular rhythm. But this is really the virtual ministry is really a key avenue to reaching people for Christ. But it can also enhance your in-flesh ministry, and it might connect you to people. Jim mentioned this before we started. It might connect you to more people locally than you ever thought possible, right? I want you to consider your virtual ministry, whether it's your personal ministry or for your church or your organization, to consider it like the front door to Christ, right? This is how people are going to get introduced. They're going to check you out online. They're going to check your church out online before they ever walk in the door for a church gathering, right? They're going to look you up online before they send you an email to ask you questions about life and about the gospel. So consider your online presence as a person and as a church, your front door. All right, so the second question, how should we approach digital ministry? And I want you to ask yourself this question. Why do I want to reach people digitally? So this gets at your desire in particular. And again, I want you to be thinking really this whole time in terms of kind of two separate domains. Your personal ministry, whether you have a personal Facebook page, Instagram, blog, things like that. And then for your church, your organization, right? Why do I want to do this? What's my desire? What are my motives even? So this is a heart level question. It's really an end game question. What do you want to get out of this? And this question, you guys know, as it pertains to any area of life, it's going to say a lot about you. It's also going to expose the idols that we have in our life. And so I want us to consider these really important things that I've learned, things that have really hit me hard in terms of idolatry and internet idolatry and trying to build an identity online. Because if we're honest, that's what you're doing, right? You're building this presence, this persona, and there's some danger there. And it's something that, again, this is why we're starting here. You don't just go right into the strategies. You're like, why am I doing this? As a church, why are we doing this? So the first thing to know is really the big picture. And perhaps I would say beyond any strategy, this would be the thing that if you take away one thing from this seminar, this would be it. It's that social media makes a great servant, but it's a terrible master, right? So social media makes a great servant, but it is a terrible master. It's really meant, I think, in God's design for all of the things that are that can be bad or wrong or hard about the internet and digital ministry or digital life, social media. I think one of the designs is it's meant to serve and enhance our ministry. And for many people, even ministers of the gospel, it can become an identity and it stops being a servant. And what happens is we begin to crave the likes and the comments and the followers, and we want to know how many people are reading our blog, how many people came to our church's website this week. Good metrics to know the breadth of your influence, but they can be terrible if they start to rule our hearts. And so social media then stops to be a servant that's drawing people to Christ, and now it's mastering us, and we're trying to draw people to us. But you guys already know this, but I think that it's important to encourage you. You're all ministers in some way. Some of you you're leading ministries, you're leading your church, and so maybe nobody says this to you. Your identity is in Christ. You're his delight. You are a priest and a king in his kingdom. You're his ambassador. You represent him, and he's put you at a specific place at a specific time with unique tools and unique abilities and skills and spiritual gifts to represent him to people, to present the gospel to them right where you are. And social media serves that purpose, but it's not your identity, right? You're an ambassador. That's your identity. You belong to Jesus. You represent him. And all these other things are gifts that God has given to use, to steward, to bless people, to encourage people, to call people to repentance and belief in the gospel. So let it be your servant, not your master. I know from experience, like I get really excited about things really quickly. My wife would tell you this, and I'm just like 150% in. And so maybe if you're like that with something like social media interaction, digital ministry, it's easy to then start to make this kind of an all-consuming thing. You get so excited. You're like, I'm going to take the world by storm. I am going to dominate this. That's kind of the attitude I have with everything. Like if I'm going to do something, I'm going to be the best at it. That's just how I'm wired. But there's a danger in that, right? Because it can become our identity. So Christ is your identity. Don't let this be your identity. So there's several ways to approach virtual ministry to keep it as a servant. This is by no means exhaustive, and I'm sure you could ask 100 people, 100 Christians what they'd say, and they'd give you different answers. But to me, these things, I think I have 7 of them here, 6 of them. I think these are wise, and I hope that they're helpful. So the first thing, as you approach it humbly. If you're trying to minister online so that you could have thousands of followers, that verified white check mark and that blue circle, to become the next celebrity Christian, chances are you'll crash and burn. Most of us are not going to have that kind of following and impact, right? You'll set up expectations. You'll never meet them. You'll stall out. You'll give up. You'll think no one likes or shares my posts. Is anybody reading this? It's not worth it. But if you come to it with this humble disposition as a servant who's ready to do whatever God calls you to do, and you leave the results up to God, you'll be successful even if you had 6 followers. Again, Jesus only had 12 physical followers. By all accounts, by worldly standards, he was an absolute failure, right? He had 12 followers. All of them except John left him at his death, and then he died a criminal's death. And the world would look at him and say, well, Jesus, you're a failure. But we know that's not true because we're all here today on this call because of the people that Jesus invested in, right? And so whether you have 6 followers or 600 or 6 million, if you're faithful with what God's given you, you can make a difference. And so approach it humbly. The second thing we've alluded to, approach it as a tool. Tools are instruments that they're used to build and shape and form raw material into something beautiful or useful. And that's really what virtual ministry is, particularly in the social media domain, because what you're doing is you're taking the raw materials of words or ideas or even a picture, and you're making it into something, you're turning it into something that would honor and exalt Christ and help people. You're taking words and you're putting them together in a way that helps people understand the gospel, that invites people in to explore the gospel. So social media, digital ministry doesn't exist for itself. I mean, think about it. Everything you see online, just in your normal everyday online, happenings is meant to get you somewhere, right? It's meant to get you to something, or to buy something, or to connect to someone, or to connect to an organization or a movement, right? The internet is a tool to something else. It's not an end in itself, right? I have friends who work in web development. I have friends who make websites, they make apps. They don't just make these things for the things. They're making them to push something toward people, to get people to come to something. And so that's what digital ministry is. It's a tool that we're using to connect people to Jesus or to build them up. And so it relates back to the identity thing, right? If it is an end in itself, it becomes an identity. I didn't have anybody read this post and nobody liked it or shared it. That's pointless. I'll just get off of social media. Well, but it's a tool. It's a tool. It's a tool that as we use it today, maybe it's less effective, but tomorrow or the next day, it might reach that one person who then shares something, and 100 people see it, and then 1,000 people, and on and on. And that's how spiritual multiplication works, right? That's how discipleship works too. So we use social media to build people up, point them to Jesus, empower them, whatever the case, to minister to people. We use it as a tool, so we need to keep it as a tool. Number 3, approach it thoughtfully. In a nutshell, have a plan for your brand, right? That's catchy, that sticks. Have a plan for your brand. And by brand, I don't mean something that is self-centered or anything like that. I just mean, who are you? Who is your church? What do you want people to know you for? When someone comes to your page, when someone comes to your website, when someone sees that post, what do they want? What do you want them to think of when they think of you? And so most of my posts, I'm making people examine their hearts, think hard about life. That's what I want people to think when they see one of my Instagram posts. And so, because that's what I do as I read the scriptures, right? And so I'm trying to reflect my honest, authentic self in my posts, in my interactions online. I also try to push the envelope, right? I try to make people think critically. I don't like the status quo. But I want to do it winsomely. And so people come to my social media pages or they see my posts, I want people to think of me that way. Like, I am trying to figure things out in my head. I'm trying to think critically. And so I want to help other people think critically. Okay. So being thoughtful just doesn't mean, how do I think through content, but also your tone. And we're going to get to content and all that stuff later. But think about when people see my stuff, is it reflecting who I really am? Does it show that I'm being thoughtful about what I'm putting out there? I'm not being whimsical. I'm not being flippant. I'm not just putting something there to put it. It has a purpose, right? There's a reason I posted this thing at this time with this picture and these words. And I want people to be drawn into that so that they can be thoughtful too. There's a lot of really unthoughtful, uncritical stuff online, right? Again, I love memes. I love pictures of pets. That's all fun. I love jokes. Most of my Twitter is just Husker football. I don't use it for much serious stuff. But on the serious side, I want people to be thoughtful about when they interact with my social media. Approach it professionally. And by this, I mean the internet is a terrible place to vent your feelings, because often the shorter posts lack context, hard place to give nuance. But the internet can be a good place to process through emotions, through the grid of God's word, right? Usually through longer forms of writing or speaking, if you're doing podcasting or YouTube videos. But it's not the place to be juvenile, right? It's not the place to be petty. It's not the place to pick fights. And so we want to be professional when we're posting online. So we want to approach it that way. Want to approach it relationally. This is a big one, because the reason I think people are online, especially younger people, is because they want friends. There's a reason that when Facebook started, they called it, or they called the interactions and the connections you made your friends, right? And you're like, well, these aren't people who are my friends. Like, I don't even know them. But they are people who are seeking friends. And so approach it relationally. So in your posts, encourage interaction, share stories, ask questions, even provocative questions. And we'll talk later about the content, how to deal with content and how to handle negativity. But share your struggles, share how God is working in your life, share stories from your church where people, they're pursuing God, but they are just, they're not the quote unquote victorious Christian who has it all figured out, right? That shows people are really human, and it's a relational approach, and it shows people that you recognize real life is hard, and you can identify with people. But that's the point. The point is to connect with people, whether they know Jesus or not. That's why people are on social media. They want to connect. They want to connect. People struggle to connect in person. And so you can be that bridge for them. I think, isn't the name of this kind of series of talks, Be the Bridge? I think I saw that in Jim's email. I hope I'm not wrong on that. Since I don't hear a crowd reaction, since everybody's on mute, I don't know if I'm right or wrong. But you can be that bridge for them, right? You can be the online bridge. You're going to give them an opportunity online to forge real relationships offline. And so approach social media that way. And then the final one is approach it with Jesus as the hero. It's easy to make ourselves the hero on the internet, particularly Facebook or Instagram in particular. But newsflash, right? We're not the hero of the story. Jesus is. And so we want to point people back to Jesus. We want Jesus to be the stumbling block. I think of 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 23. Paul said, Jesus and his cross is the stumbling block for Jews and Gentiles. Paul didn't make his ministry about him, his personality, his preferences. Of course, he had a personality. Of course, he wrote in a particular way. He spoke in a particular way. But when it came to what is going to drive people away or draw people near, it was about Jesus. And that's a good principle for all ministry, but particularly online ministry where selfies win the day, right? My daughter is almost 9. She was reading something for school. We homeschool, and she was reading something for school about digital life today. And she read the average teenage girl spends like an hour a week taking selfies, just taking the selfies, right? I don't know how they got that statistic. I don't know if that's legit, but that's amazing, right? That's incredible that you would spend an hour a week taking pictures of yourself. So when selfies win the day, right, we want to point people to Christ, not ourselves. Okay, so that in your content that you're posting, you want to point people to Jesus. So you want to make sure when you share that testimony video online, make sure Jesus is the hero, not the person in the video, or you, if you're the one sharing the testimony. We want to make sure we're not just encouraging people to try harder so that they can be the hero, but that we point them to Jesus' grace and his strength and his salvation as our hope. We want to make sure we aren't trying to persuade people to follow some tradition or man-made law or political system or anything like that. We point them to Jesus, who's the true Redeemer and the true King, the true Master. If we do all this, right, the pressure's off of us. The pressure's not on our social media accounts, but it's on Jesus, and he's big enough to handle it, right? So we want to point people to Jesus, even as we're sharing real life things. We're sharing about ourselves, and we're even sharing perhaps on your personal pages about your family and lifestyle and all that kind of stuff, and what trips that you take. We want to still make Jesus the hero. All right, so now the bulk of the rest of our time, the next 45 minutes or so, we're just going to spend time on the last part. How do we do it? What are we doing when we're online? What are some strategies? This is super important, but the reason we spend a good chunk of time on the reason that we do virtual ministry and how we approach it is because if we have the greatest digital media strategy, but we forget the heart behind it, it'll all be for naught, okay? So I want to pause before we get into this, because this is going to have a lot more sections where we can do kind of Q&A in between. But just where we're at right now, I think probably basic heart level stuff, but important as you think about, maybe some of you haven't thought about how these things relate to ministry in the digital world. So I just want to pause and say, hey, any questions, any comments before we kind of move on to the bigger section?
I had a quick question, James, which you probably are going to get to anyway, but when you kind of get to the methods, but like, there's all these different platforms and there's all these different ways to share online, but there's almost become like a cultural, people, like you were talking about, you're not your identity, but so many people, that is their identity.
Yep.
And so my identity is, Twitter, Facebook, and people feel compelled to defend themselves online, or they see something someone posts online and they feel compelled to, I must say something about this.
Yep. Yep.
And I just thought.
Yeah, that's good. We will touch on kind of current events and the strategy of responding to that, even in the moment. But I think, just to broach an attempt at answering your question, for the people, particularly non-Christians that you interact with online, right? They do think like this is who they are. And so when we learn to speak their language, what we do is we have to identify with them, right? And we have to meet them where they're at. And so I think let's start with ministry outside of the digital world, right? And let's take some examples where we have to empathize with people and listen to them and kind of get in their world and understand their struggles, right? And so some of the most, extreme examples would be people who are struggling right now in this culture with, their gender identity or their sexual orientation, right? There is a scriptural truth for that, right? But in order to have that conversation, you need to get into their world, right? You need to ask them some questions. You need to get to know their history with the church and all that kind of stuff, right? You need to empathize with them. And I don't mean affirm, what they're doing in their sin, right? Not at all. But to empathize means I'm going to put myself in your shoes to try to understand your world, and then now transfer that to the digital world. I was watching this really dumb show on Netflix the other night when I was doing something, and it was just a magician. It was a street magician who's doing, cool stuff. And he met with 3 Instagram influencers, and the whole point of the magic trick was he was going to show that he could influence them. There's 3 people. They're 21, 22 years old, and they probably make a lot of money because they have sponsors and all this kind of stuff. This is their life, right? This is who they are. And I'm thinking, if I ever have the hope of giving them the hope of the gospel, I got to get in their world, right? And so it's easy for us to say immediately, hey, well, this shouldn't be your identity, right? Because we know that's the truth. But trying to meet people with where they are, to understand them, to understand, hey, this is your source of income, this is your life, like this is what you spend 8 hours a day doing. I want to get to know you. And so I think it's hard to know, like, hey, when I get into the nuts and bolts of it, I'm not sure what to do. But I think if you can take those general principles that you would do normally offline, start to do them online, you'll connect with people. And so we're going to get into, how, when to move conversations from online to direct message, and how to interact with people there, because a lot of the fruit of your ministry online is going to come when you get out of the big long comment box and you move, I hit my mic there, and you move it to a private message, and you start to interact with people more relationally. And then you can get to the point where you say, hey, could we get coffee if they're local? And you can start to get to know them, and you can ask questions. Hey, you seem to, I notice you really love to stir the pot on Twitter. You spend a lot of time on Twitter. Can you tell me more about that? And so then you're taking those principles that you would use offline in everyday life, and you're just bringing them into the digital world. Does that kind of make sense? I hope I'm starting to hit that. So yeah, you're right. There are people, and it's not helpful to just immediately go for the jugular and say, hey, your identity can't be here. Now, if we're talking about Christians in your fellowship, that's a little bit different, right? And you approach those conversations a little bit differently. If you notice somebody's putting their identity on the internet and you know them well, but Other questions, and we will get to more, Jared. We will totally get to more on that. Any other questions up to this point?
James, I bet you there's going to be a lot of questions. I might encourage you, for sake of time, for you to just kind of keep moving.
You got it.
Yeah, we can. You might cover some of our questions before we even ask them.
Great. Okay. So how do we do it? The internet, as we said, is nearly infinite, and so I'm just going to give you a flyover of some things, but hopefully important things. And specifically as it relates to social media, we could probably talk for hours. And so I'm going to also give you, I'll send it to Jim at the end. I kind of have a Google Doc that will probably continue to be updated with links to helpful things. There's a few links on there that have more links in those pages. And so you can explore for hours on some of these things. And some of the points that I'm going to share here and some of the strategies will come from Crew. We have a whole ministry called Digital Strategies that are doing amazing things. And so I'm summarizing some of that stuff, and I'll send you those links in that Google Doc as well that Jim can share. So we're going to cover 4 umbrella categories to help you strategize when it comes to doing digital ministry. The first one is media platforms. Then we're going to talk about your audience, the people you're trying to reach. And then we're going to talk about creating content. That's a big one, and vast topic. And it differs depending on what platform you're on. And then the last one, which I think is also just important, is dealing with negativity. So first we're going to cover media platforms. And I'm just going to pick out 4. I don't know how many social media platforms there are. There's probably way too many. And some of them I've never used. I've downloaded Snapchat for 5 minutes and I got rid of it because I thought, I don't know that I would ever need this. I'm a little old for Snapchat. But I downloaded it because at the time a 21-year-old was like, hey, you should try this. And I got on, I was like, I'm never going to use this. It's like a weird text messaging app, right? But if you use Snapchat, great. It's a way to connect. Again, hopefully what I'm going to share is really broad and principle based so that you can apply it to whatever you're using. There's Pinterest, which is a social media. Not going to talk about that because it's more for, I'm going to look at something that I'm going to build or I'm going to buy. I'm not as much interacting with people. And so hopefully the ones that I'm sharing will be the main ones that you'd use in your ministries to connect with people, to make disciples, to evangelize, share the gospel. So first one we're going to talk about is Facebook. Facebook is the biggest social media platform in the world. As you saw the statistics earlier, billions of people are on it everywhere. When you're on Facebook, Facebook is a place that is now very busy, does a ton of things, right? It used to just be, you shared some pictures, you posted on what was called the wall, which is now your profile, and you'd say fun things back and forth. But of course now there's groups, there's events, there's fundraisers, there's all kinds of things that are happening on Facebook. And what Facebook is now primarily is more for my generation and up, and some college students are on it, but it's getting older as each year goes by, right? Older people are on Facebook, and there's not as many younger people on Facebook. And so this has a little bit to do with your audience too, but keep that in mind. We'll come back to audience in a little bit. But Facebook is the place where if you're on Facebook, what you're thinking is, I can write a little bit longer. I could say a little bit more. Pictures are good, but they're not essential. Groups are vital on Facebook, right? So if your church is primarily families or older people, got to have a Facebook group. You have to have a Facebook group. If you're having events, you're holding an event for the people in your community, and say your community is a lot of families or empty nesters, you got to have a Facebook event page when you have your event. It has to be there. That's where people are going to find it. Okay. Now, if you're ministering in a place where, most of the people that we work with or that we're trying to reach are younger and they're single, and maybe they're middle and high school kids who come from broken homes, or maybe they're young professionals, married people without kids, there's a good chance that a lot of them might not be on Facebook. All right. And so you got to interweave these other platforms. So you all probably know Facebook, you all probably use Facebook, but that's a little overview. And as we get to the other umbrella points, we're going to be kind of talking in a big tangled web as we weave these ideas of platform and content and audience together. Instagram. Okay, Instagram is owned by Facebook. And so it's not the same as Facebook. It's primarily a place to share pictures and short captions. But there are some people, and I'm one of them, who have started to use Facebook to write a little bit more, because people don't always click to go to your blog. They don't always want to go to your blog. They don't want to read a long article or a long post, but they'll read maybe a medium to short size article on Instagram because it's got a picture there. And so Instagram is primarily a place where you're going to get a good cross-section of people. You're going to get young people. You're going to get middle school and kids. You're going to get high school kids. You're going to get college. You're going to get young adults with kids like me. You're going to get empty nesters. You're going to get people with older kids, high school kids, college kids. Instagram probably has a better cross-section, in my opinion, than a lot of the other platforms, right? But it's not a place where you would have an event page for something going on at church, right? It's not a place where you're going to have groups. It's primarily a place where you're going to share something that's really catchy and sticky. You're going to share information about events, but it's also a great place to share stories. Instagram has a lot of features that are really cool that we can get to when we talk more about content as well. But as a summary, you don't just share a picture or some text. You could share a video on your feed, and I should actually pull up my phone here so I can maybe show it. And most of you probably been on Instagram, or maybe some of you have, but when you pull up Instagram, so you see is this going to work here? Okay. So you see like these little blocks, right? These are posts that I've had, right? And I share those. That's either a picture or a 1-minute video, right? That's it. You get 1 minute to share a video. And that was my biggest pet peeve with Instagram for a long time, that I could only put a 1-minute video there. Recently, Instagram, I don't know if you'll be able to see this one, my line right here in the middle, there's this little button here. It's got a lightning bolt on it, I think. Yeah, right in the middle. That's Instagram TV. So now Instagram allows you to record and post longer videos so that you can essentially you could put a whole sermon from your church. You could put a Sunday school class on there. You could have a 5-minute long testimony from someone. You could make a mini movie about something that's coming up in your ministry, or share something that's happening, or talking about a new project or an event or a partnership that you have with another ministry in town. It could be 5 minutes. It can be up to an hour. You can create these in a series so that you could have 5 episodes. It's TV. And so Instagram now has TV. I love this. My wife and I have used it as we've talked about resources that we recommend, how to, we do little 3-5 minute teaching on how to study the Bible. Right? This is so helpful. And for me, took care of a pet peeve because Instagram was limiting how much I could post. So Instagram TV is super helpful. So Instagram is a place to share pictures, short videos, and longer videos. Twitter. Twitter is sometimes confusing to me. I'm still trying to figure out what Twitter is, even though I've been on it since 2008. Their motto is, it's what's happening, because it primarily functions as purely a news feed, right? It's a place for me to go to get sports and news, and that's about all I use it for. But as a church, it's a great place for you to just send out little blurbs of events or links to your church's website. I don't know how churches would use Twitter much more than that. It's not a great place, even though you can have longer threads, you can connect posts together. it's so short. They only allow you 280 characters per post. So you don't have a lot of nuance. You can't say a lot of things that are, super helpful because they're short. However, people read in little snippets. And so it's always worth trying to experiment and see if the people that that are a part of your ministry or the people you're trying to reach are on Twitter. And then the last one is your website. Your website is probably more important than you think it is. It is the front door of your church. People will go there before they come to your building. They will stop there and they will listen to a sermon, Christian or not. They will listen because they want to know what are they teaching. If they're a family, they're going to look and see what kind of kids program that you have, right? If you're a new church, if you're a church plant, they want to know that you at least have your head screwed on straight. They at least want to know that you have a website, right? And so your website is super important. They want to see your leadership. They want to see a face, right? I've been to so many church websites where I just see a name and there's no email link, there's no bio, there's no face. And I'm like, I would never go here. I don't even know who's leading this. I don't even know the people that I would encounter. But if I see a face there, oh, well, then when I walk into the room or walk into the building and I see that guy's face, they say, oh, hey, I saw you online. I'm glad I'm visiting today. Like, that's what people will do if you have a really good, website. And obviously I looked at Candlewoods before, and it was great to see faces and names and descriptions at the Candlewood in Omaha. So that is essential. The website is also the place where you're going to link to all your social media, right? And so that has to happen too, because people will probably Google you. Chances are they're going to find your website first, and then they're going to get to your social media through your website. So your website really is your front door, and you could probably consider all your social media kind of like your side door, right? Your friends come in your side door. They knock at the side door and they come in, and right here, they're coming in the side on social media. Now they're following you, they're engaged. And so you want to link to your social media through your website. All right, your audience. How do we think through our audience? Who are they? What do they want? How do they learn? Now, I'm not an expert and I don't do as much with analytics, but all of these things have analytics built in. Your website it'll find out where are people coming from, right? How did they get to your website? What website referred them to you? And as people interact and send in emails or they follow you on social media, it's okay, and I'd encourage you to go to their profiles and find out, who are these people? This girl, Jenny Johnson, started following us on Instagram. Who is she? Well, do some research. Who's connected to her? Follow her back. So that's a key in terms of finding out who they are. If someone follows you on social media, always follow them back. Always follow them back, because you'll get connected to other people when you find out who they are connected to. You want to find out, as you're researching them, what do they want? How do they learn, right? What do they want spiritually? What are they looking for? Obviously, I'm not saying we just pander to what people want and we give them what they want, but there's somebody that's coming to you because they want something. For those of you who've been in church ministry for any amount of time, a lot of families come to church because they want a good kids ministry. They want to find something that's safe for their kids, where their kids can learn about God. And in God's humorous sovereignty, a lot of people come to Christ because they brought their kids to church, right? And so it's funny, but I've seen it happen. You all have seen it happen. And so you want to know, what are you coming here for? And so as people start to follow you, they're engaging with your website, they're engaging with Instagram. If you're in charge of the social media communication, or whoever it is, have you or someone who's like, I'm going to send out a message and say, hey, tell me more about yourself. How did you find us? What are you looking for in a church or a ministry? Or why are you curious about faith or Jesus? Second thing is, what do they need? What do they need? So this is different than what do they want, right? What do they need? They don't know they're not getting this, right? They're not getting something and they don't know it. That's the third one here. What do they need? This is going to come from you doing good research on them, learning about them, finding out where are they from, what's their demographic, right? I'm going to read their posts. I'm going to, this, there was an old joke when I was in college, Facebook stalking, right? Like if you like someone and you're like, hey, I'm kind of interested in them, I'm going to Facebook stalk them. I'm going to look them up. I'm going to see, are they a legit person, or are they kind of a crazy person that I'd like to avoid, right? And so you might want to do some legal stalking. It's all out there in the public, and you want to learn about this person. And as you learn, you're kind of doing some diagnostic work, and you're like, okay, I see that they keep posting about this, right? They're very passionate about ABC, XYZ, but they're not getting it where they're at, right? They're not being encouraged. They seem really depressed. They seem really anxious in these posts. They need someone who's ready to encourage them, ready to walk alongside them, to get them the help that they need. Oh, this person seems overwhelmed. She's a single mom. She needs some help, right? And so the social media is a window into someone's soul. Okay, and so you want to research people and find out not just what they want, but what they need, because in people telling you what they want, they might not always be able to tell you what it is that they're really looking for. Now, how to build an audience, right? So you have some people who are following you. You have some people that you're learning about, and you're learning what they want. You're learning what they need. Those things that they don't know they're not getting. But how do you build an audience? The way that you build an audience is with content regularly. Okay, this is hard. This is really hard. So if your full-time job, maybe you're one of the full-time ministers at your church, but you also have a full-time job, or maybe your full-time job just is ministry, or maybe it's outside of ministry. You just might find yourself in a situation where like, I can't be the one to do this every day. You're going to need a team of people. So that's not something we're going to spend much time on today, but just let me encourage you in your ministries, your corporate ministry, find a team of people to develop content, people who are well-spoken, people who are articulate, who know how to write, who know how to edit, who have a good eye for art and pictures. You want people on your team, so it's not all dependent on you. Now, for you personally, maybe this whole talk is an extension, not just for your ministry, but for you personally. I've went through seasons where I posted a lot and then not posted a lot. My encouragement is find ways where you can produce content quickly, but with quality. And maybe that's you're doing a bunch of things on Saturday morning, and you're going to post those throughout the next week. And then you don't have to work so hard throughout the week. Or maybe you set aside one night where you produce some things. So content regularly. Doesn't have to be daily. It could be, but it doesn't have to be. It just has to be regular, and so that people know you're there. We could talk so much about the algorithms that social media uses, and Facebook is notorious for this. If you stop posting on Facebook for a long time, the people won't see it anymore on their timelines, right? So frustrating. So you post stuff, all of a sudden, nobody sees it, because the way that their algorithms work, it actually precludes you from getting in line, so to speak. So content, so important, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. Hashtags. Use hashtags wisely. And in terms of strategy, this might seem really weird. This actually might be the most important thing that I tell you today. When you're on Instagram and Twitter, especially, if you want people to find you, then be aware of how you're using those hashtags. And so I hope I don't have to explain, but if you don't know, this is what a hashtag looks like. I'm just going to put something in the chat. Hashtag awesome, right? So what that is basically an identifier. It's a marker that the social media algorithms use to kind of bunch together all of the stuff that's with that tag, okay? So I might say, watching the Husker game today, hashtag GBR, go Big Red, right? Now, anybody who posts hashtag GBR it's going to go in this line with mine. And all the people who are Husker fans watching that football game that same day if they search that tag, they're going to see my post, right? And so that's the main way to build an audience with the church. And so what I would encourage you to do is not to do hashtag spiritual terms or hashtag church terms, right? The Christians will find you on the internet. But if you want to connect with non-Christians, if you want to reach people in an evangelistic way, in a way that you're trying to reach people who are not yet believers, be creative and search around, spend some time looking at what are the hashtags that are out there, right? And so you might use in a post where you're maybe quoting a psalm or a verse from a psalm on Instagram with a picture. Maybe one of my, the psalms that are dearest to my heart is Psalm 88, which doesn't end on a positive note. And it's a psalm where the man is struggling with the weight of whatever is in his life, and he feels like God's abandoned him. So I could do hashtag psalm, which I might, but I might also do hashtag depression, right? Hashtag anxious, hashtag life, right? Hashtag, as you do your research, find something that people are identifying with. Because what they do is they get on their phone and they go to the little magnifying glass icon, which is almost on every, search bar. So I click on that and I just type in anxious, because this is where people are going when they want to find out how to not be anxious. And your post is going to be in there at some point, and you want them to find it. Okay, so hashtags is going to be the crucial way that you build an audience, that you build a following. When you do an event, right, you want to put whatever. So I'm in Lincoln, right? I'm going to do hashtag LNK. I don't know why K is in there, airport code, but there's no K in Lincoln. Hashtag LNK events. And so people, they're on Twitter or they're on Instagram and they're looking for stuff to do. They're going to look at Lincoln events and that hashtag is going to pop up because of the way they built the software, right? So hashtags are so vital. And I would just encourage you in your extra time this week or this weekend, I would just Google how to use hashtags on social media, and you'll probably find a billion articles that would help you to get into that even deeper. But think creatively and don't just post Christian hashtag stuff, right? Try to identify with the way that a non-Christian would think as it relates to your post, and they'll find you. And then giveaways. This is a fun one. We have our team leader here at Crew. Jim was actually interacting with him over email, maybe phone. Andy, my friend Andy Allen, loves to give stuff away, like almost to a fault. Like he's just ready to give stuff away. Oh, $25 gift card here. Crew, we love it. Like people have been really generous to us, so we love to give it away. Like we'll do giveaways at the beginning of the year. We'll do giveaways at our weekly meeting. We'll do giveaways online for people who interact with us. And so I'll also include a link at the end to an article on how to do giveaways. But if you have money in your budgets with your church, I would encourage you to do giveaways. And so the way this looks is like, hey, if you post a comment or you share this article, you'll be entered to win a $25 gift card to Amazon, right? You might also say something like, if you make a video for us about your spiritual journey, whatever it is, and you share it with us, you'll be entered to win a gift card or this book that we're giving away. And for you personally, if maybe personally you don't have the funds to just say, oh, I'm just going to buy stuff and give it away, there's plenty of opportunities with publishers, for example, where you might get a free book to give away if you write a review, for example, and put it on Amazon. And so you might read a Christian book, you might review it, publisher might give you another copy, and then you could do a giveaway on your personal site or on Instagram or on Twitter. And you just say, hey, share this, comment for as many number of things that you do. That's how many number of entries you have to win. And then they win, you send them the book. Or if they're in town, they can come pick it up. So giveaways are a great way to engage your audience. And people love free stuff. I love free stuff. So, all right, now creating content. How do we create content I will send you an article also in that Google Doc about how to write well, how to write good stories, how to caption pictures well. Again, these are all kind of coming from Cru Digital Strategies. I have found that there are times when I labor over writing a 15-word caption for a picture. I'm like, what's the right way to say this? And it's because I want to be thoughtful, right? I want to say it in a way that's helpful. And so thinking through, how do I caption something? What do I write is really important. And so you'll read an article about that. But I want to give you some ideas to create some content for yourself, for your church. So the first thing is to plan ahead. This is important, right? Take advantage of the natural built-in calendars that are in our lives. And so things like Christmas and Advent, right? Lent and Easter, summer, where it's a little more relaxed for people, for at least most people. Their kids are out of school. You can take advantage of holidays that occur in our calendar for special posts, right? So plan ahead and think through the calendar. What are the natural rhythms of people's lives? And we won't get into it here, but there are a lot of programs that you can use to schedule your posts. And so you can use those apps. You can use them on your desktop computer. You could use them on your phone, so that you don't have to do the post on Christmas Eve, right? You don't want to be on Instagram on Christmas Eve. But you could schedule it ahead of time so that that post goes out, because the people who want to find you, or the people in your church, they are on their phones on Christmas Eve, right? And so you can use a scheduler app to do that, so that you don't have to be on your phone and your computer on those times when you'd rather be away from it. So plan ahead, think through the calendar, and then just in general, with those people I mentioned earlier who are on that communications team that are helping you write, get together with them and try to think through, hey, what could this next month look like for posting on our Instagram page for our church? How do we want to build our audience so that we have, maybe you have 50 followers now. How could we get to 100 by the end of the month? What kind of content are we going to post to reach the people we want to reach? This is really the cool thing about social media today. Say your church meets in an inner city environment, and you're like, we would really like to reach inner city people. What do we do other than just go door to door and knock? Well, you want to find things in the community and talk to other businesses or other ministries and ask, what kind of things are people interested in? And they're going to be looking for those things on their social media, again, through hashtags and other avenues, but mostly that way, through the search bar. And so then you can start to post those things to say, hey, we have this event on Tuesday night about how to make a budget and how to help your family plan financially, right? And so then they're scrolling through their feed and they might find that as they're searching for those things. So plan ahead and think through, what can we do in the next month to post our content and build our audience? Current events is something that can be kind of a touchy subject, and it can be very hard to deal with, because sometimes posting things immediately is not always the most helpful thing. So this is something that you're going to need to seek wisdom for with the people that are in your life, your other ministers, and if you're not one of the pastors, certainly one of your pastors or elders. But you want to be able to respond to current events in a sensitive way, in an appropriate way, in a gospel way, and in a way that's helpful to people and that doesn't push them away, but draws them near, right? And so obviously the one that's been most recent has been what's gone on with George Floyd's death, the riots around the country. And so I didn't post anything in the first couple days, but eventually when I post, my posture was simply, I want to listen, and I want to learn, and I want to hear from people, right? I'm not trying to take a stance. I'm trying to say I want to love my Black brothers and sisters. I want to listen to them, and I want to do everything I can to get them equality, right? I'm responding, but this is not a place to air my frustration. This is not a place to vent my feelings, as we said earlier. This is not a place to pick fights, because I represent Christ. I don't just represent me or my family. I don't just represent Cru. I represent Jesus. And so you want to respond to current events. That should be a part of your content that you're thinking through. So, when something happens, say that there's an earthquake tomorrow, right? You're going to wake up and go, well, what should we say as a church? You don't have to say much. You could post a picture with a heart and a fact that, maybe a verse about God being Emmanuel and that he's near. And then you just say, we're praying for the people of this city, right? And that's it. But you're responding in an appropriate way, in a sensitive way, in a way that is not pushy. You're not making an opinion or assumption about people, but you're still able to respond. All right, themed series. This will also be on the Crew page that I sent you, and they have a lot of actually pre-planned things that you can use on there. Actually, quite good, with verses that are already there, quotes from people throughout church history. But you could do a theme series where you could say, hey, over the next 7 days, we're going to have a post about, maybe you're doing a sermon series at your church on relationships, friendship. We'll just take friendship. And maybe you're doing a theme series and on Instagram and Facebook, you can post pictures of people or passages about friendship from Proverbs. Maybe you have somebody share a testimony about how a friend changed everything for them. And you just do that for 7 days. And then you move on after that. And now you have your content for the next 7 days. And maybe you put that all together on a Monday. You start on a Tuesday and it runs through the next Monday. And there you go. You have one post a day. On Instagram, again, think back to platforms. This post might be a little bit shorter. You might take a little snippet of what you posted on Facebook, because on Facebook, you can read a little bit more. And then maybe you have a full-length article on your church's blog. This seems like a lot of work. And it is. It is a lot of work. But again, think missionally. This is where people are. This is how people interact. Prayer posts. These are great for Instagram stories, which I didn't mention. I don't do this a lot, but I've seen other people do it. And so this is not from personal experience, but Instagram has a feature called stories, which my wife tells me this is what most people watch when they're on Instagram. They don't actually look at your posts. They look at your stories. And so I'm going to get my my phone back up here. And so again, you see all my posts here in the grid, right? But when you actually click on my face, what you see is a bunch of stories that you can cycle through, and then they go away after 24 hours. Up at the top of the screen, there's all these little circles. These are people I follow. And I'm going to click on my friend Danielle here. And Danielle has a story, and you could put a lot of them. And I think each of them can be up to a minute. All right. And they just cycle through. And if I click, I just go to the next person's story. I go to the next story. And this is what people are looking at on Instagram. It's a great place to put a prayer post. And so you might have a passage from the Psalms about prayer, and then you can experiment once you download the app. And if you need help with any of this, by all means, reach out to me after this seminar. You could have a little click here button that Instagram has, a little feature they have, to send you a message. You might have on there, how can I pray for you? How can we pray for you today? Right? Someone's going to go there. They're going to see the story. They're going to say, oh, I have a prayer need. So they click there, and then they just send a message to Candlewood or to whatever the name of your church is, or to you personally. And so that's a great way to connect with people, probably mostly Christians, because they have a need for prayer, but they don't know how to get it to you, right? They're probably not going to go to your church's website, but they're on Instagram, and there they see it. So they'll send you a little prayer request. Ultimately, post what you're passionate about. Post what your church is passionate about, and make it Christ-centered, right? So I know that you guys are passionate about Jesus. Keep it Christ-centered. But in terms of, again, hey, if we're trying to reach, families, if we're trying to reach a population that is incredibly secular and doesn't know the scriptures, maybe we're doing a lot more on how to understand the Bible. Maybe we're doing some more apologetics type stuff. Post what you're passionate about. And that ultimately is going to carry the day. In terms of what your content looks like. Whatever you post, I'll just say this. It needs to look clean. It needs to be easily readable. It needs to have some sort of picture with it, whether it's on your website, your blog. Facebook, not as much, but pictures help. Put a photo on it. People like looking at pictures. They're going to be more likely to see it, read it, and engage with it if you have a photo. So with that, there's one website that I want you to write down. It's called Unsplash, unsplash.com. It is royalty-free, no cost photos by mostly professional photographers who give away their pictures for free. I use it for everything. I have a web developer friend who's been using it for years. He said, I've never doubled up on a photo. There are hundreds of photos posted daily. And so for your websites, even for my Instagram posts, a lot of my Instagram posts just come from there because I want to find an attractive photo that will catch someone's attention because I want them to read what I write. All right. And so they see this picture and they're like, ooh, that's cool. What did he say? Right. So unsplash.com. I want you to remember that, bookmark it, and you can sign up for an account and download as many pictures as you want. It's all totally free. All right, well, how do you reach new groups? We'll do this more quickly here. The way that you reach new groups, specifically non-Christians, again, is you want to talk about those current events, right? And you want to find common ground with people. Talk about things that matter to them, right? For younger people, justice matters to them, right? For younger people, relationships matter. They might not know how to articulate it, and they're relating online, but relationships matter. So you want to talk about what they care about. You could write longer posts on your blog that deal with issues that they would have questions about. So evangelistic kind of posts, apologetics type things, worldview type things. You might do a series on your church blog about the differences between the world religions. And then what you might do is you might have just short posts on Facebook and Instagram pointing people back to your website to say, hey, this week we're discussing Islam on our website. This week we're discussing Hinduism on our website. Go there for the full article. It's going to, and then you're using those hashtags, right? So now you can start to see this messiness, and it is messy, I'll be honest, kind of come together into a bigger messy ball as you think about all these platforms together. Commenting on other people's posts will be really important for connecting with non-Christians. Reading what they write. Again, I said earlier, following people back when they follow you. Doing some digital research, researching the other people that live in your area or the area that you're trying to reach, following them before they even follow you, right? Think about a church following groups that you normally wouldn't think that you'd follow, right? Maybe groups that are anti-Christian, right? But you want to reach them. You have a heart for them. Follow them on Instagram. You're not guilty by association. You're trying to relate to them, right? I could imagine Paul taking some flack from going into the Areopagus where the Greek pagans lived. They worshiped all these gods. But he's like, well, that's the people that God loves and wants to reach. I'm going there. And so you got to go there. And so it might mean following some people that you would be uncomfortable following otherwise. Again, giveaways. Give stuff away. And hopefully people will come running. All right, reaching Christians. Again, hashtags, regular posts. And then here's a key one, partnering with people and other ministries and other churches. So don't exist for your own sake. Celebrate other ministries. Invite them to guest posts. Do an interview with them and post it on your Instagram, your blog, your website, your Facebook, so that other people can see, oh, this church is passionate about the gospel in our city, in our country. And they're not just pointing to themselves, they're pointing to these other ministries. And so experiment with that and try to connect with the other ministers in your area so that you can have a good digital partnership with them. And then I'd say create teaching platforms online, whether that's a class that you put online or your sermons. Create platforms so that people can get connected and learn. All right, dealing with negativity. We're coming in for a close here, and we'll have probably 15 more minutes or so. I'm going to actually just reference that. I'm going to send you an article online so we have more time for questions. Dealing with negativity is so important. And there's an article that will be in that Google Doc. please read it so that you can think through, how do I respond to negative comments online? And I got to skip through all these. You can kind of see them here as they come up, but they're all in that article that I'll link to. All right, we're going to close here with this. Other digital strategies that you can use to make disciples. Using your favorite app, like Zoom, right? I don't want us to neglect this. There are ways to connect with people that are not through social media or our website. But in terms of making disciples, we have to remember sometimes the biggest obstacle for people is time, and they don't feel like it's valuable. A great way to get somebody connected to a discipleship group is to say, hey, we're doing a Zoom meeting once a week for an hour. There's no commute. It's not 90 minutes plus your drive. It's 1 hour on Zoom. And I guarantee you're going to have people who take advantage of that, and they're going to see, oh, I do need something like this. And so take advantage of this kind of medium, even if you all live in the same city. All right. Something you might do for your church is what I call table talks. You could do these on Zoom. Geared toward Christians. It's a place for them to talk about theology or questions that they have. It's a place for them to bring insights or reflections. And then on the other side of the coin, for non-Christians, you could host a Zoom Ask Anything. And this is a place, as you interact with people digitally who are not believers, you can hold maybe a once a quarter Ask Anything call where people are invited and encouraged to ask hard questions. And anything goes. Nothing's off limits. And you can advertise that in your Instagram and your Twitter posts and your Facebook posts. That'll be the link I send out, and I'll just send it to Jim, and he'll be able to send you to that link. So we have probably 15, 20 minutes or so for Q&A. Went a little bit longer, but what questions do you have really about anything that we talked about or anything that I didn't get to? So yeah. I'm going to shut my door because my kids just came home and someone might run into this office. So let me shut this quick. Great. So what are your thoughts? What came up? What are you curious about?
First, James, let me just say that's a great presentation. A lot of resources there. Thank you for all your work over the years putting that together. But yeah, gang, take advantage of this time we got them live here. Ask any good questions you have.
I have a question. Do you use do you have like multiple accounts for each social media platform?
Yeah. Good question. So one thing there's only one platform that I have multiple accounts for, and that's YouTube, which we didn't even talk about. But I've created an online learning platform called Whiteboard Theology it features short videos and then material to work through, and then online links that people can use to learn. And so it's essentially like a little online free self-seminary. I have my own YouTube for that. I'll have eventually my own Instagram or Twitter for that. It's just in development now. But for the most part, it's just my own James Pruch, and they're all the same, at James Pruch for Instagram, Twitter, and all that. But there would be some value for people who are both, pastor, if you want more of an official account and a personal account. My wife has two because she posts personal stuff that's private on Instagram, which only people who are friends can see because we post kids stuff on there. And then she has another Instagram account that's public. It functions more like a blog so that anybody in the world could see that one. So yeah, that's a good question. You got to think through those kinds of things, certainly for privacy's sake, if you want to have stuff that's family related. And I would recommend, if you have family stuff on there, I would recommend keeping it private. And then you only you only let in who you let in.
Oh, that was kind of a question I had, James. I really enjoyed your seminar. It seemed like it was kind of more geared towards churches and organizations and ministries and how they run their social media presence, more so than and probably a lot of the people here are probably not, because usually church has like, one or two people that are kind of in charge of the social media for the church or for the ministry. So what of these things do you see as transferable to just everyday people who are maybe trying to trying to reach out online, especially like you said, because we are also social media users, so our own social media feeds are filled with pictures of our families and our friends and things that are going on in our lives.
Yeah, I'd say most of it's transferable. It's just the scale, right? So the scale is going to be smaller for personal, which is why most of this was pretty intentionally broad. Let's think about the content, for example. If you really want to reach non-Christians with your personal social media, like John asked, you're probably going to need a separate account, because I've been around the internet long enough and maybe read and watched too many things that makes me just a little leery to let anybody into my world, especially where my kids are involved. So that seems, like bunker-ish, but it's like, well, there are weird people on the internet, and so I want to protect my kids. I also don't want to use my kids as like examples or things like that. I've never been like, I just don't want to put their lives out there. It's their life, not mine. But for people that we know, like our family and our friends, like on my wife's other Instagram, that's just family and friends. And so great, share pictures, that's fun. We want to see each other grow up. We've moved so much. But if you really want to reach non-believers, I'd say open up a separate account for all those things, make it public so that anybody can see it. But I would still be doing those same things that I recommended with hashtags and exploring and trying to connect with people. And probably personally, you're actually going to have more time to get on other accounts and comment. You're probably going to have more time to engage with people on a personal level than somebody who's working in a church and maybe they only devote 5 to 10 hours on social media a week. So you also are able to probably reach people in a better way because you don't have a church logo in your icon. So you're just Jared, right? I'm just James, right? In my personal stuff, I don't write that I work for Crew. I think my Instagram thing just says trying to change the world a few words at a time. And that's it. People don't know what I do. And they wouldn't if they just saw my Instagram. So you might have some more opportunities to engage with people that way if it's just a personal account. It'll be harder to build a following because I'm not famous. Nobody knows me. People aren't paying me to, do sponsored ads. So it's going to take some work. But if somebody's like, hey, I really want to do this, well, then give yourself some time to do it. And you will find people and they will start to follow you and you'll follow them and you'll interact with them. Commenting is so important. Comment on things. You hang around long enough, people will start to feel like you care.
James, just for a clarification, on your, say, professional account, your public account, you don't use that you're with Crew?
Yeah, I do not put that I'm with Crew on there. If someone asked me, I would tell them. But the reason we do that is because Crew doesn't make us say, who we are. On my Twitter, I think I just have Christian, husband, dad, Nebraskan, right? I still don't put my...
Where do you sometimes maybe on your events and things that Crew is doing and you're trying to invite some people, how do you keep those separate?
Yep. So with Crew, we have a Crew account, which I'm one of many people who help run that. And it's got our Crew logo. It says University of Nebraska Lincoln underneath, where all our events are going. And so what I do then is on my personal accounts, if people are paying close enough attention, I will share what they wrote, what UNL Crew wrote. And so then, this guy seems to post a lot. He shares a lot of what Crew does. you're going to figure out that I work for Crew. But I also want the people who aren't Christian, if they're reading my stuff, to realize, hey, I'm just I'm trying to be a bridge. I'm also a safe person. This is not mainly me representing my ministry. I'm just writing things that are kind of even outside of my personal ministry, my own thoughts, devotional thoughts that I have, struggles that I'm having, things that I'm observing. So I'm posting from the UNL Crew official page along with students and some other staff. And I will probably share those things on my personal account. So like I said, it's complicated because I'll have, logged in to Crew and James Pruch on my Instagram, and you go back and forth. I'm going to post to Crew. I'm going to share this on my James Pruch page. So that's how I handle it. I don't know of a better way to do it.
Yeah.
But I also know there's people who say, yeah, on my personal page, yeah, I'm pastor of such and such, or people who are like, hey, I'm a salesman who works at this place. And it's really up to you. What do you want to put on there so that when people come to your page, they see, oh, I can identify with what he's at. Now, as a caveat, last thing, I do have my link in all of my social media profiles to my website, which people will go to the About page there. And that's where I say, I work with Crew at the University of Nebraska. I used to be a pastor.
Yeah.
All that stuff. So if people want to read a longer bio.
You're not invisible to them, but you're not flying a flag either.
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
Gotcha.
The website, your personal website, and I would suggest, like, if you want to do social media well, start a personal website. You can use WordPress for free to do that. That's a great place to have a longer bio. Maybe that's even a place where you can share your testimony in an appropriate length so that people can know a little bit about your story. So.
James, I'm pretty ignorant in a lot of ways using social media, so I really appreciate this time together. But one thing that has been challenging to me since I've done so much ministry in the past, before social media days, is when I really want to reach new people in my city. It seems like the virtual world spreads me out so much, and I need to spend so much time interacting with people that I'm never going to meet in my city. They're in another city or another state. And so do you have any thoughts on how I can really focus on building relationships in my local city?
Yep. So Facebook is going to be a great place for that because there are groups there. So it would take some work to do some research, but I'd start with Facebook and I would search groups and just search for affinity groups, right? So maybe you like riding bikes, or maybe somebody here's a cyclist. Well, there's going to be a cyclist affinity group on Facebook. You're going to be able to find them. Or maybe there's a fantasy football, affinity group on Facebook or whatever. You're also going to find links to, kind of, again, public square areas or discussion groups where you're able to dialogue about things. Lincoln has tons of garage sale groups. Not a great place to, meet people who are going to be lifelong friends, but it connects you to people in the community. So Facebook's going to be the best place for that. The outside of Facebook, somebody asked to put that link up again. I will put that link up again. Let me get that really quick here. There we go. So there's that link for you. Instagram, Twitter, Twitter especially, you're able to kind of hone in on certain topics that you want to follow. So for example, I have a topic that I follow, Nebraska football, and I get those kinds of things that come up. And so then what I can do inevitably is I start to see the same people posting in those topics, and I can start to interact with them. And so you might have a topic or maybe there's a topic that you're like, I'm interested in this in my city. Maybe we'll just pick the broad one of social justice. Well, you're going to start to see people who are following that in your location. And then it's just a matter of, like I said to Jared, are you going to comment on what they comment? It's totally acceptable to take a conversation offline and message someone privately to say, hey, really appreciated what you wrote here. I can't identify with that. Can you share that? Can you share more with me? And they'll interact with you over those direct messages. So that's a perfectly normal way for people to react and respond. And hopefully at some point you get to the point where, you meet people face to face. I haven't had that opportunity a lot because, like you said, most people are all over the country or the world. But if it's something you really want to hone in on, you can take the time to use those tools that the social media platforms have to do that, to meet those people. It just takes work. Like it is not hard once you get into it. It just takes time and work. Yeah. That's why these social media influencers, it's their full-time job. I mean, they're doing this 60, 70 hours a week, right? And they're making a lot of money from ads and sponsors, but it takes time. It takes time. YouTube, YouTube professionals, that's what they do. It's a weird world to think that you make money from, making YouTube videos, but they do.
Thanks, that's helpful.
You bet.
Hi, James. My name's Robin. I'm here in Lincoln too.
Cool.
And so I really don't have a question, but I really appreciate your talk because I work with a website and it does take a lot of different people to be actively involved in trying to get your message across.
Yeah.
And so we have someone that does Twitter, we have someone that does Facebook, we have someone to do this other key thing. And it is like making sure the website is up to date, because a lot of people can go in there and see that it's has to be up to date.
Yep.
And I work at the library here at UNL.
Okay.
And so we have a social media person who's all involved, and she has lots of students, and she uses Excel that tracks their Twitter accounts and what they're going to post, the picture they're going to post.
Yep.
And there's all different sites, programs, pinning. But as a person just starting out, I have a Twitter account, I have Instagram account. I don't go to those every single day, so it's kind of hard to keep it up. Like you said, kind of make sure you do it regularly, and that's very true. I found that you need to do it regularly to keep people engaged in what you're trying to do and accomplish with your site. So I really appreciate your talk.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, one thought, even as you were talking, something that I try to do for me personally is I use the Notes app on my phone. So whether you have an iPhone or an Android phone, you probably have a Notes app. And I just have a folder called Writings. And if I have a thought, I just pop out my phone and I just start to write the thought there and type it out. And I just have it in the folder. And I have, I have 6 of them in here right now. I haven't done anything with them, but they're there. But sometimes I do have 1 or 2 that I'm able to do on the spot. And then when I have a moment, I'm able to edit it and then put it online. So that really is just a folder for me to collect these ideas so that, like you said, Robin, I'm able to do it regularly, right? I'm not like an everyday poster, but I try to get close to, personally, several times a week, I'm putting something on there. Sometimes twice a day if they're short and little. But I think have some kind of a system for yourself so that you can collect your ideas. You want to post personal stuff? That's fine. That doesn't take a lot of thought, right? You take a picture of your kids running through the sprinkler and you're like, hey, love this hot weather. Awesome, great. But if you want to put content out there that's like really valuable and that engages people, again, on a spiritual level, that's going to take some thought. And that's where you have to have some kind of system in place to record these things in an organized way. Because you might type it out on here and then you're like, this is stupid. I can't do this. I don't know how to say this in the right way. I can't put this. Okay, great. That was an editing process. So have something for yourself so that you can be collecting your ideas in order to develop, rich, good, gospel-centered content, encouraging content that will engage people. Any other thoughts or questions?
One other thing, James, I'm sorry. Regarding Snapchat, like at university where I work, They are looking into Snapchat more. They actually ask students to that use Snapchat to see if that's something that they will further, because they're trying to always push information about the libraries out, and they have a huge list. And so Snapchat was like the new one because they know more people who are coming into the university are on Snapchat.
Yep. Yeah, and I think that really depends on, maybe maybe just as a part of your church, maybe you work with a lot of middle school kids. Okay, you're going to be on Snapchat, like no doubt. High school kids, you're going to be on Snapchat, and obviously college kids too. But so it's just the matter of who are the people that are around you in your life, and you want to be wise in which platforms you use. You don't have to use them all. Right? You don't have to use them all, but you want to use the ones that, if you work at the university or a university,
yes,
then yeah, or I'm sorry, yeah, if other people do, or if you work at the local college, like think about what are they on, to go back to audience, right? Like what are they using, right? Well, the people who read my blog are mostly older than me, right? Maybe some my age. I'm 35. They're on Instagram, right? But people in the next generation up, 45, 55, 65, they're reading blogs. They're reading articles, right? They're looking at a big computer. But what are people using on here, right? Most people look at the social media and internet on their phone. Snapchat's great for that. So I wish I knew the dynamics of Snapchat and how it all works, but I don't. I know it's mostly a messaging app, and that's why the university is probably using it to get, push messages out to people.
James, I have a question about specifically reaching international students. Have you found any particular mediums that are more effective, or have you ever used like WeChat?
Yeah, so
apps like that.
Yep, a lot of international students here at the University of Nebraska are on WhatsApp, and so it's really just a text messaging app. But that's what they use. So you could create groups there. So it's great for groups when you want to communicate something like, hey, we're having a dinner on Friday, and you've met these internationals. Or maybe, hey, just a reminder to come to the Bible discussion this week, and you use that WhatsApp. In terms of using digital resources to communicate the gospel, there's a great app that you can download from Cru called God Tools. So God Tools. And they have basically tracks and other evangelistic materials and booklets that are on that app. And a lot of them are in different languages. And I know Mandarin's one of them. So that's a great app to use. And then you could also look in your app store for the Jesus film. And you could download the Jesus film in almost any language I think that they have available. So that would be great for an international student, particularly one that doesn't know the gospel story. And you could watch the Jesus film with them on your phone, sitting at a cafeteria table, on campus. Or you could just tell them, hey, download this app. You could hear the gospel story of Jesus in your own language. And so, yeah, look for the Jesus film app. That might be on God Tools app. I'm not sure. If it's not, just in the App Store or the Google Store, just search for Jesus film. So yeah, those would be two big ones, especially if it's an international student who struggles with English, because you can start to engage them. You could, if you're sharing the gospel with them, you could be reading a tract in English and they're reading it as it's in front of them on their phone in Mandarin or Spanish or whatever language, Russian. I think there's tons of languages on there. So that would be a great app in terms of a digital resource. And then one other resource you can point people to, it's a Cru resource, everystudent.com is all, I think it's only in English. Maybe there's some other languages available. I haven't checked in a while, but it simply answers really important questions about God. And so for international students who are interested in learning about Jesus and learning about the Bible, great website to point them to, because they can get their questions answered in really simple ways. So you might have a discussion with them, but of course they're hearing it in their, maybe third or fourth language that they speak. But here you can point them to everystudent.com so they can sit down, read it, think about it, meditate on it, and then you can come back with them and have another discussion. So.
Thank you.
Yeah, you got it.
James, I had a question. Thanks for sharing. This might branch off of what Lou asked in the chat earlier. So maybe I have a hesitance sometimes that comes up, the effect of social media, talking with people, because it seems like online people might just broadcast their opinions, and it comes across more harsh, maybe.
Yep.
So are people really receptive online? So
yeah, that's a great question.
I was wondering if you can share, not to put you on the spot, but share like an example where someone actually was receptive, like a testimony.
For sure. Well, just in general, remember to look at that article about how to respond to negativity online. That just helps you think through a grid for how to do it. I'm getting better at this, but I'm trying to take the disposition and the posture that they're not actually yelling when they type. It's really easy to assume when you read a comment that people are yelling. My thought for you all and for me is when we're responding, if the platform allows emojis, use emojis, because they were created to help people understand your emotions. So, and use exclamation points, not all caps, right? So all caps in internet world means I'm yelling. And I do that in a funny way with my wife on texting sometimes. And she's like, why are you yelling? And I was like, I'm trying to be funny. And obviously it didn't work. So use emojis, use exclamation points. Thanks for your comment, exclamation point, smiley face. Then they know you've disarmed them, right? And so I think that's kind of the key. If it's like borderline, ooh, they seemed rude in that comment, disarm them. Thanks for your comment, exclamation point, smiley face. Can you tell me more about that? Question mark. Appreciate, you stopping here. And then if the next comment seems rude, no emojis, just seems like a weird tone, then I think that the way to handle that is to move that conversation offline to a direct message where you can say, because in a direct message you could say, I'm confused by your comments. Are you angry or not? Am I reading you incorrectly? I want to believe that you're not angry, but I wanted to ask you. So you can do that. I do find that people tend to be bolder online. I'll put it that way. I don't know if I'm going to say ruder, but people tend to be really bold on the internet, especially Twitter. Twitter's an angry world. It's angry about football and politics and anything. Facebook is becoming an angry world, and it's hard to read some of the comments. So I try to disarm people, and I try to be balanced. And just like in person ministry, I just really try to say, I want to listen and understand you. Can you tell me more? Can you explain more? So I'm trying to think of an example where things went really well, but I'm trying to remember. Well, actually, I mean, just even this last week with all the stuff that's gone on in the country, I've been interacting with my cousin on a thread, and people don't know that we're cousins because we have different last names. But she's actually, in the past, we have butted heads on other things online. And so this time she's asked, can you send me that article? I'd love to read it. I really want to learn more. And so I send it along. She's like, thanks, hits the like button. And so that's an example where, hey, it has gone well. In the past, it hasn't. But I think if you approach the conversation with a good disposition, it will probably, you let your arms down, and other people will too. But if somebody comes on and they're just like, I don't know why you're into this Jesus stuff, it's a crutch. That's where I think you could say, in a public comment, hey, we really appreciate you commenting here. Check your DM, and then message them privately. Like that, from the beginning, you just got to move that conversation offline. And then privately, if they're still angry at you, then just say, hey, we would really love to help and have a fruitful conversation, but if you're not interested in that, then maybe it's best that we kind of stop the conversation. So I would do that in person too. If a person was yelling at me, I'd say, I'm kind of done here. I got better things to do with my time than to get yelled at. So I hope that helps a little bit.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
Well, we might need to wrap it up here. Excellent questions. James, you might be impressed. I know I am. Darren is still online from Malaysia. If I read my watch right,
What time is it?
Almost midnight there, isn't it?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, yes, it is.
Okay, well, good for you.
So you've kept him attentive. So good job there, James. Great content, great presentation. Hard to cover so much in such a little time. You did really well.
Well, appreciate you guys having me on. I'm just going to pop my email in here, and then my website. I mean, you can just Google my name. I think I'm the only one in the world, which is kind of fun. But you could go to jamespruch.com, and then on any platform, it's just at James Pruch, which I'm really only on Instagram and Twitter. And you can all friend me on Facebook now that I've kind of met you. But Instagram and Twitter, totally public. Facebook, if I haven't met people, I don't usually respond to that. But so yeah, reach out to me if you have more questions or you just want to talk. I just love connecting with Christians all over the world anyway. So good to meet you guys, and glad I could help for a little bit. So great.
All right. Hey, I'll pray and wish you all the best. Father God, again, just thank you for the larger body of Christ. Lord, thank you for the incredible opportunities we have in our world today. Though we do have empathy and grieve with COVID and all those who are suffering, the recession, a lot of pain there, the George Floyd and other incidents that have been going on like that for many years, God, we are grateful that it does expose the sin in our world and the scars and the fear and the hopelessness. And God, we just ask again, this is so related to what we're talking about today. Help us just even these last parts, use the social media, the internet to ask good questions, to really listen well, to learn, to seek to understand people, to express empathy. And Lord, then also that you would open doors for the gospel for us as we build bridges of friendship and trust, that we could share the good news of Christ in a very contextualized, appropriate way with all sensitivity. Lord, help us all grow in this. God, bless everyone here. Take care of us, lead us, and guide us. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
And so James, you're going to email me another, a Google Docs that you said? And
yeah, it's the